Kehilat Shalom. So those of you who are here in the shul should have in front of you a text that says at the top, imagining the end of Moses. If you're on Zoom, you won't have it in front of you, but I'm going to read it out loud. So it's not the end of the world. Let's say a little bit about the particular piece of paper that you have in front of you. This is, first of all, it's from the Midrash Deuteronomy Rabbah, but it's also separately collected in its own Midrash, as I mentioned before, called Midrash Petirat Moshe, the Midrash on the death of Moses. And this was prepared by Rabbi Stephen Sager. Rabbi Sager was a close friend of mine who passed away a few months ago. I think I actually wrote about him in one of my rabbi updates. He passed away a few months ago. It says in the Gemara that when somebody, I mean, very, very important in rabbinic culture to bring something, what's it, B'Shem Omro, in the name of the person who originally said it. And when that happens, it says that the person who died, their lips move in the grave, which is a beautiful thought. And I spoke last night. If you were in services last night, I taught a little text from the Chidushei Harim, who was the grandfather of the Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes, somebody that I teach all the time. Rabbi Sager was the one who first introduced me to the Sfas Emes. So it's kind of closing a circle. So I don't know how far we'll get with this text. It doesn't really matter because it's an old text that will be here longer than we will. But I will read it through, one or two paragraphs at a time, and then we can discuss it and we can continue. I mean, it's also about what we read on Simchas Torah, so we could also discuss this, whatever we don't finish, do a little bit further on Simchas Torah. Okay, so it starts with quotes from the third chapter of Deuteronomy, which is the Et Hanan and I pleaded, where Moses is going through basically at this point all of the tsaris that the Jews have caused him. And so he says, I pleaded with God, right? And I pleaded with the Lord, let me please go over and see the good land. The Holy One, blessed be he, responded, enough, never speak to me of this matter again. Okay, so this is what's known as the Dibor HaMachil. This is like the beginning verse. Now, the Midrash is going to go through this kind of like word by word or phrase by phrase. Okay, so said Moses, you have written in your Torah, this is from Exodus 21:5, if the servant declares, I love my master, he shall remain an eternal servant. Okay, now, the original context for this is the laws of, I don't know if you want to call it eved, servant or slave, indentured servant, whatever it is, right? But after a certain amount of time, this eved goes free, but and Moses is called Eved Adonai, right? The servant of God, or if you want, the slave of God, right? Abdullah in Arabic means exactly that, the slave of Allah, right? Very common name. And if somebody who is, and so there's Ovadia. So somebody whose name is Ovadia, if they live in an Arabic country, just like we have Hebrew names and English names, they might have Hebrew names and Arabic names. So his Hebrew name might be Ovadia and his Arabic name Abdullah. But at any rate, so if the servant wants to stay a servant forever, they say, I love my master, and he will remain Eved Olam, right? Which literally you could translate a servant forever, right? In the original context, it doesn't mean forever, right? It means until he dies, right? But here, so Moses says, you've written in the Torah, if the servant declared, I love my master, he shall remain an Eved Olam, forever. I am such a servant. I have loved you, your Torah, and your children, and I do not want to go free. I do not want to die. Okay, so Moses thinks he's pretty smart here, right? He's found a verse that he thinks is going to let him live forever, right? Said God, I have decreed death from the days of the very first human, right? Everybody dies, right? Adam, first human, died. Everybody dies. It's what happens, right? Moses replied, the first human deserved to die. For an easy commandment was given to him, and he transgressed. What's he talking about? Right, eating, it doesn't say an apple, right? But eating the fruit of the tree, right? I mean, pretty simple, right? Don't eat from that tree. The only mitzvah he has, right? He had one job, right? One job. And the only mitzvah he had, don't eat from that tree. He ate from the tree, so fine. So Adam died. Well, no. So Adam deserved to die, right? One mitzvah, he blew it. But I should not die. So God said, Abraham, who sanctified my name in the world, died, right? All right, so fine. So you're better than Adam. Okay, granted, you're better than Adam. But are you better than Abraham? Right, Abraham sanctified my name in the world. And Moses says, Abraham sired Ishmael, whose progeny anger you. Okay, so new, so fine. So Moses, yes, so Abraham, yes, is the ancestor of the Jews. Great. He's also the ancestor of the Arabs. Not so great. Right? So he deserved to die too for being the ancestor of the Arabs. Okay? And so this is probably fairly late. Midrash, because I'm not sure where exactly, when exactly the idea that Ishmael was the ancestor of the Arabs came. Although the Arabs buy that, by the way, too. I mean, they think that, that they have an Akedah in the Quran too, except it's not Isaac, it's Ishmael, because Ishmael is the favorite son. Okay, and anyway, so Abraham deserved to die because he was the ancestor of the Arabs. Okay, so God said, consider Isaac, who stretched forth his neck upon the altar. Okay, well, Isaac also died, and Isaac was willing to be sacrificed for my glory. Moses replied, from Isaac there came forth Esau, right? And I don't have time to go into this. I've spoken about this before, but Esau in rabbinic understanding is the ancestor of Rome, okay? And also, again, in Muslim understanding, because how do you say Jesus in Arabic? It's Isa, which is a cognate of Esau, not a cognate of Yehoshua or Yeshua. Okay, so they have the same thing too, right? So Isaac, there came forth Esau, Rome, who destroyed the temple and burned your palace. Okay, so now God says, are you better than Isaac? He says, yeah, I am better than Isaac. Isaac is the ancestor of the Romans. Okay, yeah, he's the ancestor of Jews, but he's also the ancestor of the Romans. So he also deserved to die. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, you could, Midrash, we say, ain't that much, Midrash, right? We don't ask too many questions of Midrash, right? But, he deserved to die because of what his descendants would do hundreds of years later. Now, of course, there's no, right? I mean, for Moses and God, this is not, but maybe Moses' descendants won't do so great either, right? So God said, consider Jacob, from whom there issued 12 times, not one, 12 tribes, not one of them blemished. Moses replied, Jacob never ascended to the heavens, neither was he like a ministering angel, nor did you speak with him face to face, right? All these things the Torah says about Moses, or give him the Torah from your own hand. The Holy One said to him, enough, never speak to me of this matter again. Okay, so how does the argument conclude? How does the argument conclude? I mean, I love this. I don't know about you guys, but I love this stuff, right? Yeah, Jacob. God said the argument was over and the argument was over, right? He did not win the argument. He pulled. Yes, he did. I'm sorry. That was a little scary. No, but he didn't win the argument. What did he do?
He died.
What?
He died.
He
Died.
No, I mean, no, this argument is still going on. He just ended it, right? I mean, he pulled rank, right? He basically, and I don't know. I mean, there's only one person here who still lives with his parents, right? And sometimes, right? I imagine, because I had parents too, right? Is that sometimes you have a disagreement, and actually, all of the reasons in the world may be on your side, but the parent says, you know what? I pay the bills, right? I pay the bills. I decide, right? This is not a question of who's right, who's wrong. It's a question of who's got the power, right? And God says, you know what? I'm God, you're not. Never speak to me of this matter again. Oh, we'll go on a little bit more. Okay, any before I do any, yeah, Leslie.
Wasn't there someone who God took up to heaven that didn't die?
Yes. Methuselah? No. Enoch.
Okay, so what was
Enoch and also Elijah. Elijah went up to heaven in the fiery chariot, and no record that he died.
Were they better than Moses?
No, but the Midrash guy wasn't paying attention to them.
Okay.
I mean, again, you can't. I mean, this is a fun genre, right? But you can't. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it says Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more. It doesn't say he died. So there's all kinds of like really weird midrashim about Enoch, what happened after he walked with God and was no more. And Elijah got into the fiery chariot and went up to the heavens, which is why Elijah can come to your Seder, because he never died, right? It's not like he came back from the dead. He never died. He's hanged, most of the year he hangs around up in heaven, but on Pesach he comes down and gets really drunk.
But there's two things. Elijah was after Moses, and Enoch didn't teach anybody the Torah. So,
Right.
so the argument is God is still right. Both of those people are not comparable.
Well, that's also true. That's also true. But first of all, I don't think chronology really matters, right? I mean, if Moses is saying Abraham and Isaac deserve to be punished for what their descendants are going to do hundreds of years later, then chronology doesn't matter. But you may be correct. However, God, I mean, in the end, God still pulls rank. He doesn't really win the argument. He pulls rank, and he's entitled to do that. I mean, he's God. right? But to my mind, he does not win this argument. He just declares it, ended. All right, so Moses said, Master of the universe, I am but a single person, and Israel is 600,000. Many times they sinned against you. I pleaded on their behalf, and you forgave them. You look after 600,000 and will not look after me? A decree and God replied, a decree concerning an individual is not the same as a decree for a community. Further, up until now, the hour was given to you, and now the hour is no longer yours. Okay, so this will be the last thing to discuss. So basically, I want to rephrase what he's saying, right? So Moses is saying, I was the leader of, these pain in the butt Jews for a long time, right? And you got mad at them all the time. And I went to you and I said, God, please forgive them. And you did, right? So you forgive the Jews as a collective, even though they are big pain, but you can't forgive me. And God says what? The decree on a community is not the same as a decree on an individual. Okay, now this is a really important theological point, right? Because what God is saying here in this midrash, right? Like if you look, God promised, all of these haftarahs that we read, in the 7 weeks between Tisha B'Av and Rosh Hashanah, right? They all promise deliverance, right? They say, remain fast to the covenant and you will be delivered, right? And then, right? Who here isn't descended from Jews who suffered, right? Who were faithful to the covenant, right? And so, but God, the way it's understood is it's not an individual promise. It is not you obey the covenant and you will be okay. It is Israel as a collective will obey the covenant, and Israel as a collective will eventually be okay. Again, one could question that as well, right? But that's a different point that he's making, right? So, and then again, here God's basically pulls rank, right? In other words, the hour was given to you and now it's not, right? I gave you, which is why, right, when we say, when somebody is having their birthday or whatever, what do you wish them? Well, not just happy birthday, but in the Jewish tradition, right? Bis 120, right? Ad 120, right? To 120, right? Why 120? Why do you wish somebody that, that they live until 120? Okay, 2 reasons. One is, by 120, their 401k will have run out and probably, it's enough, right? But beyond that, no, but seriously, right? Moses lived to be 120, right? And nobody gets to live longer than that now, but that's how, so God's basically, again, shutting down the argument, pulling rank, saying, I gave you to 120, good, right? Enough. All right, any questions or comments on this part? All right, so if here's the deal. If you're really going to study this, keep it and take it home. If you're not going to study it, like put them back on the bench behind the Torah, and so I'll reuse them for some other time. Okay, Shabbat Shalom. I'm trying